All right. Now let's see. We apologize to those of you who are watching on YouTube. We are double checking everything to try and make sure that it is working. So we will begin in just a minute, but it will be a slight delayed ending or beginning because of the check. It's looking a bit better. Watching everything to try and make sure that it is working. All right, well, it's coming through my phone. So if I can see myself on my phone standing in this room through that camera, then I think we're okay. I think, but I just got a suspicious text message. Oh, nope, it's not a suspicious one. It's Penelope saying that everything's okay.
Cool.
Yay, indeed. Okay. All right, so now I gotta get myself back in the right frame of mind of starting rather than tech support. Let's see. Anyone else in the parking lot before we get going? Don't wanna...
Judy's watering.
I know Judy's helping with the plants, but let's go ahead and get going because we're dealing with Parashat Naso, and this is especially good because we have a Kohen present. Because a lot of these early chapters of Bamidbar talk about some of the different duties that the Kohen would provide. We talked about the duties in the Mishkan and then the Levite duties of carrying different bits. And now we're talking a little bit more about the duties of reconciling husbands and wives as through the ritual of Sota, which we've done lessons on in the past, the lessons of the Nazarite, which we've also talked about before. But, well, one of the other duties of a Kohen. Well, what are the duties of the Kohen nowadays? Because we got no sacrifices anymore. So what duties are left for a Kohen?
We say that Birkat Kohanim.
Okay, so we've got Birkat Kohanim, or in English, the priestly blessing, right? May the Lord bless you and something. That's it. That's your whole job.
In place of sacrifice, you take the first aliyah.
Okay, so they get an aliyah, whether that's a duty or a privilege is certainly debatable. I know a lot of people who would love to have the first aliyah as a set thing, but that's certainly on the list of things that Kohanim still do.
The Pidyon
Haben, the redemption of the firstborn, which actually they don't do the Pidyon, they facilitate the Pidyon by the family. That's kind of about it as far as the job description goes. There are other limitations, of course.
I was going to say about marriage limitations and all that.
Exactly. There are limits of who a Kohen can marry, which are still operative. There are limits on for whom a Kohen may go to the cemetery, which are still relevant. But in terms of duties, these are pretty much it. Now, an aliyah, that happens weekly. Pidyon haben happens whenever a child has been born under just the right circumstances, and someday we'll do a class on that particular mitzvah. Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing, how often do we do that?
Well, it's just a couple of times a year here, but I used to do it all the time.
Couple times a year or every day?
Well, in Israel, it's done every day.
In Israel, it's done every day, and in some other Sephardic communities, it's done every day. But in the Ashkenazic world, it's usually done only on Chag, only on the festivals, which includes the high holidays as well as the 3 festivals, one of which just finished, Shavuot. And we're going to talk about Birkat Kohanim, because it is the most, what's the right word? It is the section of the Torah that has the oldest physical provenance. That is to say, of all the things that have been dug up throughout Israel, of all the pieces of pottery and jewelry and inscriptions and whatnot, the priestly blessing is so far still the oldest piece of Torah that has been unearthed, that matches the Torah, that we actually know this is from the Torah.
Dead Sea Scrolls?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are not older. The inscription is even older than that.
From the Cairo?
Even older than that. From a little piece of what looks like it would have been a necklace or amulet or some other reminder. So this is the oldest inscribed piece of Torah that we have, and anything that wasn't inscribed, unfortunately, has dissolved by this point. So it clearly mattered to the people in the ancient world, and it should clearly matter to us. And so we're going to take a look at it. Sound good? Good. We've got very little Torah to cover for this particular section because we're on chapter 6, verse 22. And I apologize, the handout has the wrong chapter number on it. Talking to those people who are using the handout online. Chapter 6, verse 22 of the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. And I think it would only be fitting, Michael, if you don't mind, to have you read for us as the resident Kohen.
The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to Aaron and his sons. Thus shall you bless the people of Israel. Say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord bless you and protect you. The Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. The Lord bestow his favor upon you and grant you peace."
And one more verse.
Thus they shall link my name with the people of Israel, and I will bless them.
Okay. Very, very short verses. But as you already sort of noted by reciting a translation rather than reading the JPS, it's not 100% clear how we should translate each and every one of these words, of what is being intended by this. So when we say, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, may the Lord bless you and keep you, protect you, guard you, mean very different things in English. And then we have to ask the question, well, what did the Hebrew itself originally mean? Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, may the Lord shine his face upon you or towards you and be gracious to you. What does that mean? And Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, and may God lift his face towards you, and may God grant you peace. And then, of course, we have this little coda at the end saying that they will place my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them, which is kind of odd because we started off by saying it's the Kohanim that are blessing them. So if the Kohanim are blessing them, is God also blessing them? And God wouldn't have blessed them if the Kohanim hadn't blessed them? It gets a little confusing. So let's take a look at some of the translational options we have for this. And we will get that underway, and then we will look at the more meaning side of what the
You're younger.
of what the overall blessing is trying to convey. All right, now, Michael, I forced you to read for us as the Kohen, but I don't know if you want to continue or if I should pick.
Happy to read.
Okay, go ahead and start us from the top.
Unless, Carol, you'd like to read.
No, I have trouble reading.
Okay. The following are said in the Holy Tongue.
And when we talk about the Holy Tongue, we're talking about Hebrew. Now, this is an important statement, right? This comes from the Mishnah and Sota. And it's pointing out that for everything else that we do as Jews, it can be done in any language, right? If you are doing the Amidah, if you are doing anything else in Judaism, you can do it in French, German, Arabic, Spanish, English, Yiddish, whatever you need, if that's the language you know. But for these few things that are about to be listed, it's Hebrew or it's not done right.
The recitation for the first fruits, chalitza, the blessings.
Chalitza, that's one category.
The blessings and curses, the blessings of the priests.
That's the blessing that we're talking about here.
The blessing of the high priest, the paragraph of the king, the paragraph of Pega Arufa, and the priest anointed for war when he would speak to the nation.
All right, so there are citations here for all of the other sections. We're not going to go into to detail, but right here, we're pointing out that the blessing that the priests are giving are one of the few things that are absolutely required to be done Ivrit, in Hebrew. Why? I mean, why, if everything else? Why can I stand before God and recite the Amidah in Esperanto if I want, but I can't say, may the Lord bless you and keep you, as a mitzvah, that is to say, as the act of the priests doing it in English? Why not? Head scratcher?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems weird, right? The recitation of the first fruits is a legal requirement for bringing the first fruits. The blessings and the curses are a specific category of legal, what's the word, approbation of setting apart a contract, that this is what will happen if things go well, and this is what won't happen, or this is what will happen if things go wrong. The blessings of the high priest, the paragraph of the king, the egel arufah, that's the cow you break the neck of if you find a body that you can't determine who was the killer, and the priest anointed for war when he makes his declaration to the people. These are all legal, contractual, or in some other way very, very specific language, which makes a lot of sense of why it needs to be in the original language, because a translation may not do it. But the priestly blessing?
Could it be because the priests are speaking for God?
Because the priests are speaking for God, meaning?
They're the link. The English is not the right translation, but it may be the right interpretation.
So in the Amidah, where it's us talking to God, our words are from our heart. And if the Hebrew can't capture that because our skills are not capable of doing so, we can use English or any other language as necessary. But here, the words don't belong to the priests, right? The priests are reciting what they have been commanded to recite. It's not their blessing. And we may call it Birkat HaKohanim, we may call it the priestly blessing, but it doesn't belong to them, and it's not what they are inspired to say. And in fact, it didn't make it to the final sheet, but the halacha says very clearly that when the priests do the Birkat HaKohanim, they cannot add any additional blessing of their own. They can't say, may the Lord bless you and keep you, da 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 da, and also, I hope you have a wonderful day, or I hope that you have a good, parnasa, good financial success, or have wonderful, healthy and happy children. They can say all that to you later as one person to another, but when they are doing this blessing, it is in the Hebrew, exactly as written, done, because that's their job. Okay, so I guess the Hebrew matters. I guess the specific words matter, which is why we're going to try and unpack at least some of the interpretations that go along with them.
Bless you with material wealth. The reason this is the first of the blessings is explained by our sages in Avot 3:15. If there is no flour, there is no Torah.
Right, ein kemach, ein Torah. Right, it's pithier in Pirkei Avot. So according to Sforno, it seems to be that the may Adonai bless you is a material blessing. That this is a request for blessing. This is a request for sustenance, for being able to get by. And indeed, even Ezra sort of echoes that.
An increase to life and wealth.
And the Barbanel.
This bracha is especially intended for working people.
Right. And so as we're going to see, a Barbanel has a list of which blessing goes with sort of which category of people that are being covered by this universal blessing. But it seems that most of the commentators agree that when we say Yivarechecha, that when we say may God bless you, we're talking about stuff. That we're not talking about happiness and other forms and more abstract spirituality, although we're going to get to that. We're talking about stuff. Makes sense?
Right.
Good place to start?
As the Sforno said, you can't learn Torah if you're starving.
Yeah. What else are you going to be doing if you don't have enough food? So it is, I think, a very good bedrock of what is good to grant, to give to a person. All right, let's move on to V'yishmerecha.
Guard you, that no thieves will attack you and steal your money. For when one gives his servant a gift, he cannot protect it from all other people. if robbers come and take it from him, what benefit is there?
Beautiful little insight by Sifre, then quoted here by Rashi. So I give my daughter a lovely new bike, and then someone knocks her down and takes the bike. No boo. Boo. What good was the bike I gave her? Right? What good is the gift of a mortal that has no idea what will happen to the gift once it's been given? On the other hand,
as for the Holy One, blessed be he, however, he is the one who gives and protects.
Right? So according to Rashi, and other commentators echo this, the reason why we have Vayivarechecha Adonai Vayishmerecha is because they go together. May God bless you materially and protect that for you, because otherwise the first half wouldn't be much of a blessing. Right? And we'll get to the question of what guarding you might mean, or not what guarding you, but where the other aspects of guarding that many of us might have been thinking, which is our physical well-being, will come in later sections of this. The priestly blessing is very, very carefully balanced in terms of its composition. If you read through it in the Hebrew, you'll notice that it is a perfect list of prime numbers. It's 3 words, 5 words, and 7 words. It's kind of like the equivalent of an ancient Hebrew haiku. Was clearly very very carefully constructed to have this sense of balance and proportion and of increase of what was being granted, of what was being blessed. So we should assume that the earliest things are the foundation, and then more and more is coming afterwards. Make sense? Okay, so let's move on to shining. Rise and shine.
May he grant light to your eyes to see and appreciate all the wonderful things God has done and keeps on doing. You should become aware that all that you've achieved is due to his blessing.
All right, so Sephorno again is helping us here by saying when it says, may God shine his face upon you, that metaphor, because God doesn't have a literal face and it doesn't literally emit light, must mean something other than putting a flashlight. And what then could the illumination of God mean metaphorically? And Sephorno says, how would you paraphrase Sephorno's interpretation of this light?
Appreciation.
Enlightenment and appreciation, exactly. That you can see what God is doing in the world and what is there, and you can appreciate what's happening in the world, that you will be enlightened, and we even use that same metaphor in English, and you will appreciate that, you will understand what the world is like and how wonderful the world is, and by extension then how wonderful God is. Is that a blessing? Really? I mean, if I say, may you go to the museum and enjoy the modern art you see there. Hey,
blessing.
Is that a blessing? Well, and that's the idea, is that we've been granted then the boon of the first blessing and the protection of it and the second, and now we're being granted a appreciation of the source and of the giver of those blessings. And that is in and of itself a blessing. Understanding and appreciation is a reward. It is a treasure to be held on to. So we quickly move away from stuff to the next level of real blessing.
If you don't have enlightenment and appreciation, ennui.
Ennui. You may not even recognize the first 2 blessings we talked about if you don't reach this enlightened stage, this appreciation, right? It's like, so I only had a 5-course dinner last night. God.
How boring.
Yeah, I feel like a peasant. It's this is saying, no, look at this, or I get really tired of living here in Florida. There's all these weird birds that keep flapping around in the sunshine. This is part of the beauty. I mean, look at the birds, look at the trees. I mean, it's wildlife everywhere. Sometimes a little too much, maybe, but still appreciate what is there. And that's what, according to Sephorno, is being said by this shining of God's light upon us. And then he is agreed with in many ways by Abarbanel.
This is especially intended for scholars.
right? When we talk about God's light shining upon us, Barbanel is saying that's what it means to be a scholar. That's what a scholar needs, is that we can't just understand what God has given us when we study by just our own internal workings. We got to use them, we got to apply them, but we also hope for a little extra light to illuminate that study. Make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we don't have an additional commentary for vichuneka, basically because that's tricky. So the base word is chen, which means grace. Now, grace can mean graceful in the sense of graceful in English. So in the book of Proverbs at the end, when we talk about Eshet Chayil, when we talk about the ideal woman, we say that false is grace and vain is beauty. Grace there is used as a physical or charismatic attribute, which is essentially superficial. But in many other places, when we talk about chen, when we talk about grace, we talk about it as being gracious in the sense of being beneficent and giving and caring and worthy. So which is it here?
Gracious.
Well, likely we're asking God to be gracious towards us as opposed to making us graceful. That is to say, making us that charming sort of person. And we're asking for God to give us more than we deserve. But the thing is, we already, just by even opening our mouth, are asking God to give us more than we deserve. Because we're alive, which is more than we deserve. Anything after that is excessive. So
The Christian concept of God's grace
mhm.
is exactly that all will be forgiven and you will have God's grace, meaning acceptance.
Absolutely.
But do we feel that too?
Not by the same vocabulary. That is to say, we certainly believe, and the whole book of Leviticus was about God's acceptance of us, no matter what we have done, by going through the process of tshuva, of the process of returning, of repenting, and of reconciling our relationship with God. It doesn't happen by fiat. It doesn't happen just because God wills it. It happens because God willed that we be able to, and then we take the next step of making that repair and that connection. So it's a different word and a different style of restoration of the relationship with God than the Christian theology. And so translating this word as grace in the Christian sense would seem very awkward. So it seems to be that we are asking that God deals more beneficently than even the basic requirements that have been mentioned. That God go even above and beyond, which is a little bit of chutzpah, but then we're known for chutzpah. So, but like I said, there's not a lot of additional commentary on this. But for the last two, we are going to see a bit more. So let's lift God's face or raise God's face towards us.
By suppressing his wrath, according to Rashi.
Right? So Rashi is saying raise means don't be angry. Raising your face means not being angry. Think metaphorically, think human psychology, right? You are super mad with me right now.
You're mad at somebody, you don't want to look them in the eye.
Exactly. I can't even look at you right now, right? And the metaphor that's used throughout the Tanakh is God hides his face when God is angry, right? That God turns away his face. That's the metaphor for when we have done something which is going against Torah. And so the idea that Rashi is bringing here is that when we say, may you raise your face towards us, we mean, may you show us happiness and kindness, not be angry with us despite our numerous failings. There is an implied that from time to time we are going to do things that are against Torah, and we are asking for God's forgiveness despite that, and keeping things good. Make sense?
Yeah.
Onward.
Which gives you a vista of the world to come, which awaits you. This line is similar to what David said in the Psalms. With you is the fountain of life. By your light do we see light. In It also reflects the statement of our sages in Brahma that the world of the future, in the world of the future, the righteous sit with their crowned heads and enjoy the radiations of God's glory.
And sorry, I left off the attribution. That is also sforno, bringing that in, interpretation. That raise means when God raises his face towards us, what do we see?
Light.
We see light, and we see through that light
World to come.
the world to come. We can see eternity, right? So in the second line, when we talked about God shining light to us, right, that was opening our eyes to appreciate this world and appreciate everything God had done. When we talk about God lifting his face towards us, we mean to say, and that says forno, that as God lifts his face and we see, we will see through to eternity, not just the light of this world, but we will see the light forevermore. We will see the vistas of the world to come. And we will understand then, appreciate, and of course be blessed by being able to be in that radiance for all time in that world to come. It's an awful lot to put into a couple little words, I know. But like I said, there's a reason why the sages said this needs to stay in the Hebrew, because only in that compact form can we pack in all of this meaning. And the metaphors are important. And if we had just written, may God show you the blessings of the world to come, it does not emotionally strike us the same way of may God lift his face towards you. But if we can understand that, as well as the idea of also suppressing anger, then we're getting much more meaning out of the metaphor than we would have from the prose. And finally, the last blessing, which remains the last blessing of all of our services, which is for peace.
The serenity of peace, which is equivalent to an infinite, unbroken, and undisturbed existence, not tainted by punishment, something which is the feature of life, a feature of life in the world to come.
So Sforno continues this pattern of saying it's higher and higher and higher, and we've now reached the point of true peace, which is this beautiful, perfect harmony, this beautiful, unbroken and undisturbed existence. That's what peace truly means in this sense, and that's the ultimate gift that God is giving to his creation. Abravanel is a little bit more literal.
This bracha is especially intended for soldiers.
He said, okay, the first one was for working people, the second line was for the scholars, and the third line, those are for the warriors, the soldiers, right? Because they are the ones most in need of the gift of peace, so that they no longer have to be soldiering under such difficult circumstances. As always, the different interpretations are not mutually contradictory. It's not as though Abarbanel was arguing with Sforno about what this meant. The blessing can contain more than one simple thread or idea. Does that make sense? All right. So let's talk about the vehicle then for this blessing, right? The Kohanim, the people who deliver this blessing officially. Because although we have made this so central to our liturgy that when we have a minyan and we do a repetition of the Amidah, we include a citation, a quote of this blessing. The ideal way is for it to be given by the Kohanim, and it is a mitzvah for them to do it. And according to most commentators, it is a mitzvah for us to pay attention. So let's talk about those guys.
There are 6 factors that prevent one from reciting the blessings.
All right, so there are 6 ways you can be disqualified. If you are a Kohen, you have this mitzvah to do it, but if you fall under one of these categories, or multiple, you would not be invited to come up to the bima, or to the platform, the duchen, to give this blessing.
Pronunciation, physical deformities, transgressions, maturity, intoxication, and the ritual impurity of the hands.
All right, so if you can't pronounce your words correctly, well, we began by talking about the fact that this needs to be done in Hebrew and precisely, and if you can't manage that, then you can't do the blessing. Physical deformities we're going to talk about in just a second, as will transgressions. Maturity, they're talking about lack of. That if a 5-year-old who is a Kohen who doesn't really know what he's doing or what this is all about or can't go through the ritual properly should not be brought up to do this. And even a young man post bar mitzvah may not have the presence of mind to be able to do the blessing with the right intention, and therefore maybe should sit one out until he's ready to do it properly. Intoxication, if you're drunk, you don't get to do this. And ritual impurity of the hands, since the blessing is done with the hands extended, this was considered an additional emphasis on that, and therefore you had to have ritually pure hands, which is one reason why we do the preparation of the kohanim that we do. Okay, so let's get back to the physical deformities, which may have seemed a little unfair, and see what that means.
The priest should not recite the priestly blessings if he has blemishes on his face, hands, or feet, for they will attract the people's attention.
All right, face, hands, or feet. Rambam says that we're reading from Mishnah Torah here. Why face, hands, and feet?
Because they're visible.
Because those are visible, right? So does this mean that if a person has a huge goiter in the middle of their back, that they can or can't do?
You can still do it.
They can still do it. Does this mean that the person, maybe has some unsightly hair condition, like a ponytail hanging off the back?
You can still do it.
They can still do it. But if their hands are crooked or bent, or if their feet are clubbed or twisted,
They can't do it.
it seems they can't. Why not?
Because you can see.
Because it's a distraction for the people who are being blessed or witnessing.
Because it's a distraction, but it's a particular type of distraction. Because someone's cell phone going off is also a distraction. And so are the air conditioner rattling or the microphone not always working. We know about that. Or other types of things. Why these, from the visible things, with the hands that are up, the face, and then the feet that would be visible underneath the cloak at the bottom, why would these be a problem? Why would these be especially diverting? Or what would be wrong with these as being especially diverting? Okay, we got to do a diagram. When in doubt, make a diagram.
You don't see the Kohen's face.
The way we currently do it,
Yes.
the way we currently have the custom, especially in the Ashkenazic world, yes. The halacha itself does not require that the Kohen's face be hidden, or that the hands be hidden. Although the reason why is attendant to this particular point, right? So we've got our, I'm going to see if I can put two hands up, right? We've got our Kohen doing the blessing, and then we've got the congregation over here. And as Michael pointed out, there's a talit, there's a tzitzit, and maybe they're stretching over the hands, or maybe the hands are visible through on the other side. Where should Mr. Congregant or Miss Congregant be focused?
On the person doing this.
So the most natural thing is to focus, right, line of sight, on the person who's performing the blessing.
But he's not supposed to look at the Kohen.
You are supposed to look towards, but not at. And that's the distinction that Rambam is bringing the halacha here, is trying to make. If there is something wrong with the Kohanim's hands or face or feet, then you are going to be looking at the Kohen. You will be looking at the person. And you're not supposed to be looking at him because he's not doing the blessing, the real blessing. He may be reciting the blessing, but he's not blessing. And if you look at him, you are looking at the vehicle, and you're losing sight of what you are supposed to see through him, which of course is God, right? You are supposed to be, by looking through him, by looking towards him, to be experiencing the blessing that God is bringing in this manner. And if you stop at the person, you've missed the point. And so anything about the person that would be excessively distracting would disqualify the person from doing it. Does that make sense? Maybe? But we have a caveat. And yes, I did deliberately format the page so we could put this on the backside because I didn't want people to read ahead.
person whose spittle always dribbles when he speaks or is blind in one eye should not recite.
Right, so this is another list of things that disqualify. If you're the kind of guy that just spit falling out of your mouth all the time, or you've got an unsightly eye condition, don't do it. However,
if such a person was well known in his city and everyone was familiar with him, he may recite the priestly blessing, or he will not attract their attention.
Right, everybody knows that's just, that's that's Tom. He's just like that. he dribbles a little bit, no big deal, and everyone is just used to dealing with Tom, and used to dealing with one-eyed Frank. That no longer is a distraction. So what Rambam is trying to bring here through the halacha is that the distraction isn't that God doesn't want somebody with a deformity doing this. The distraction is God doesn't want people focusing on the person doing this. And if you can look past the deformity, by all means do it. And by all means, the congregation should accept this person to do it. It's not about the disqualification of the person, it's about the disqualification in the mind of the congregant.
We're not discriminating against the handicapped, so to speak.
No, we're pointing out that people discriminate against them. And therefore, we have to get past that mental block in the congregant. It's not God's hang-up, it's our hang-up. And if we can get past our hang-up, God has no problem with us having people even with purple hands, as Rambam goes on to talk about. Back then, when people used to be cloth dyers and all of that, you get up to your arms in all sorts of color, and you pretty much were indelible at that point on. No problem. If you're the new guy in town and no one's used to your bright purple hands when you go up for doing the blessing, then yeah, maybe you should wait until people know about your bright purple hands. But once everybody knows, or if you're in a community of dyers, then there's no problem with you doing that. Make sense? Yes? Not quite so discriminatory as it might have first appeared? Okay.
A priest who does not have any of the factors which hinder the recitation of priestly blessings mentioned above should recite the priestly blessing even though he is not a wise man or careful in his observance of the mitzvah.
Keep going.
This applies even though the people spread unwholesome gossip about him or his business dealings are not ethical.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, my goodness. Didn't we just say at the bottom of the other page about something about transgressions disqualifying you? So the Talmud goes into detail about which types of transgressions disqualify you. Murder, idolatry, or violating the limits on who a Kohen can marry. That's it. Any other transgressions, even that are ongoing, do not disqualify a Kohen from performing this blessing.
Is a female Kohen allowed to do the blessing?
In the conservative movement, yes. In most congregations. In the Orthodox world, no.
Does it say anything about it?
Well, the Talmud and Mishnah never really go into the question because in their day it was already sort of obvious that it was only the men who would be doing this.
So the same transgressions, the big three,
Mm-hmm.
you have to give up your life for are the ones that keep you from.
Well, except that the transgression of a Kohen marrying a divorcee, for example, are not adultery. Exactly. This isn't incest, and it's not something for which they would be punished directly. They're not going to be killed or executed for this, but they would lose their Kohanic privileges, and that's what's being talked about here. But the halacha is very explicit. You don't disqualify for anything else. Even if everyone knows he's a liar and a cheat, you still let him do the blessing. And our second paragraph is going to explain the reasoning behind that.
It's not about it.
Well, actually a little bit different, which is, I think, a very interesting insight.
He should not be prevented from reciting the priestly blessing because reciting these blessings is a positive mitzvah incumbent on each priest who is fit to recite them. We do not tell a wicked person, increase your wickedness by failing to perform a mitzvah.
Right? So just because he's broken a bunch of other mitzvahs doesn't mean we don't keep him, doesn't mean we should keep him from performing this mitzvah. Because if we did that, that's just one more mitzvah he's not doing. And who are we to add to the burden of his guilt by not letting him do this other mitzvah? How are we doing with that?
I hear it.
You hear it.
It's hard. It's counterintuitive.
it is counterintuitive. But on the other hand, the inverse is more dangerous. And let me try and spell that out. So the inverse would be only someone who is completely righteous should be allowed to do the blessing. That specifically, as you were indicating, makes it all about the Kohen. That his blessing will be more potent if he is a righteous person. That his blessing will be more perfect, will be more translatable to my life if I know that he is righteous. And when I think he's wicked, well, God's not going to let the blessing flow through a dirty pipe, right? It's
exactly the analogy I heard for the opposite argument, that the conduit needs to be clean.
Well, when I'm teaching a Kohen what their mental state should be, absolutely. But when we're talking about the congregant, we don't want them thinking about whether the pipe is perfectly clean or not, because in all honesty, the blessing is going past the Kohen, not really through, which we're going to have to wrestle with in the second half of our back page. Right? That they are meant to focus the blessing by focusing the congregation, but they themselves can't contaminate the blessing. Think of it more like a magnifying glass rather than a pipe. And I think it's very, very beautiful that Rambam, again, based on the halacha from the Talmud, is trying to point out, you don't stop somebody who's bad from doing something good. That you would say, maybe this will be the mitzvah that will turn them around. Maybe this mitzvah, by the merit of this, they will change what else they are doing. And stopping a bad person from doing good just makes them worse. And who are we to make someone worse? Just because we're worried about the gift wrapper that our blessing is coming in? Really? No, God, I don't want the blessing because it's coming in the brown paper bag rather than the beautiful shiny wrapping paper. Really? How does the brown paper bag feel? And how does the giver feel about rejecting the gift? Okay, so let's talk about these priests and the Kohanim.
And Rabbi Joshua ben Levi said, every priest who says a blessing is blessed, and every priest who does not say the blessing is not blessed, as it is said. And those who bless you will I bless. All right,
so from Sota, based upon Bereshit, the book of Genesis, where God is giving a blessing to Abraham, God says, anyone who blesses you, I will bless. And anyone who curses you, I will curse. And Rabbi Joshua ben Levi is coming back with a very interesting parallel, because usually that's interpreted to mean all the rest of the world, that if they're nice to Abraham's children, they get blessed, and if they're bad to Abraham's children, they get cursed. And here, Rabbi Joshua is saying, no, we can even do that internally. That from the Kohanim to the rest of us, they bless us, they receive a blessing. They choose not to bless us, they're not getting a blessing. And that would say that would be applicable, I would say, as well, for the individual non-Kohanim among us as well. Bless someone else among Abraham's children, and you will receive a blessing. Whether it be a simple, I bless you, after you sneeze, or whether it be doing a bigger blessing for someone else in need, or saying a prayer on their behalf, you are engaged in this act of spreading the blessing, which will eventually reciprocate. All right, now we had a question about why we don't do this every day here, but we do it every day in the land of Israel. And we're going to look to the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, which was Rabbi Moshe Yisraelis, who was the Polish super commentator on Joseph Caro, who was Sephardic's original work. And now when we read the Shulchan Aruch, we get both of them side by side. So here is the Ashkenazic explanation of why we don't do it every day.
It's customary in these countries to recite it only on holidays, when people are in the festive and joyous spirits. On other days, even Shabbat, they are disturbed, worrying about earning a livelihood and the delay of work. Even on holidays, the priestly blessing is recited only in the Musaf service, directly before the people leave the synagogue and rejoice in holiday festivities.
Okay, so why don't we do it every day here in the rest of the world?
We're too distracted.
We're too distracted.
world is too much risk.
We're too much in the world. We're too much worried, even on Shabbos. According to the Ramah, and this is 500 years ago, let alone now with all the distractions we have, even on Shabbos, people would be too worried about tomorrow's work and everything else I've got to do. Well, to what? I mean, what's wrong with being a little distracted? I mean, we do everything else on Shabbos, even though we're a bit distracted. We don't say I'm not going to services because I'm too worried about, my appointment on Monday. At least you shouldn't be saying I'm not going to services because I'm worried about my appointment. Why should distraction and not being 100% of festive and joyous spirit means we don't do this? Yes, Hannah?
Maybe you might mishear what they're saying.
So first of all, if you are distracted, you're not going to hear it correctly. And as we said from the outset and spend our first half hour, the precise words really, really matter. Excellent.
She's right. You got to be present.
And you have to be present for the blessing. Who has to be?
The congregants.
The congregants have to emotionally be present. Because remember, part of this is saying, especially according to Sforno's interpretation, that you will be able to recognize the blessings and the gift that God has given you. And except on Chag, according to the Ramah, much of our life is spent not really being able to appreciate the gifts because much of our life is spent with backbreaking labor or troubles or distractions. And so if you can't really reach the point of true appreciation, then it's better not to say the blessing at all, according to the Ramah. But there was another person in the room who also has to be joyous and fully present. And that's the Kohen. Right? It's not just the congregation that has to be able to hear the words clearly and to be able to appreciate them clearly. The Kohen has to be able to utter them, has to be able to say them with full kavanah, with full intention. And indeed, they say that if the Kohen does not love the congregation, that the Kohen should not do the blessing. Right? So if a Kohen is resentful and spiteful of his community, let someone else do it. Because when you're standing up there and you're trying to give this blessing, and specifically the bracha, the introductory blessing the Kohanim do, have to mention their love for the people of Israel. And they have to mean that with all their heart. And if they can't, you should, and wait until you do, and then join your brothers and in our movement, the sisters, on the bima for the blessing. Does that sound true to you?
Yeah.
As a Kohen, it can sometimes take a lot of focus to prepare yourself to truly do this. And worldly distractions, not just gripes, can really dampen the kavanah, the intention of somebody who is trying to perform this act.
That is the most anxious I ever feel at the synagogue is when I have to do the blessing.
Good. Then
even more so than when I do a hot pour.
Then you're doing it right. Then you're doing it right. Because at no point are you acting more officially as an instrument for God's blessing than when doing the duchenin. And at no point are we more in the presence of a concerted, focused effort to feel God's presence simultaneously through this wonderful mesh of the community. And both we and the Kohanim need to be in the right place and the right mind for that to truly take effect. And the Kohanim also need to be in the right frame of mind to get past themselves. And when you're too worried about your own life, it's hard to realize that you're not that important, even though you're doing something that is immeasurably important. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is it customary that this duchenin or whatever
Mhm.
it is happens just on the high holidays, or does it happen more often in other places?
So in general, in the Ashkenazic world, the times when it can happen, if you have Kohanim available to do so and a minyan to do so, are high holidays and the 3 pilgrimage festivals. So Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. If you live in Israel, or you come from a different community which does it more often, then it happens every day. Every morning service has the priestly blessing. And having lived in Israel with a community that was following that custom, it is an amazing experience to have this blessing every single day. But then again, it's another distinction between life in Israel and life outside of Israel. Okay, so let's get back to the person.
Do not wonder what good will come from the blessing of this simple person. For the reception of the blessings is not dependent on the priests, but on the Holy One, blessed be he. The priests perform the mitzvah with which they were commanded, and God in his mercies will bless Israel as he desires.
So, Nu, Rambam for his wonderful summary.
Don't worry about who the priest is.
It's not about the guy
Yeah.
or the gal with the talit and the hands up, because they're unimportant. But if they're unimportant, why are they doing it? Why can't God just bless us without the pageantry? It's like God needs the Kohanim or else he can't reach us. Is this some sort of mid-air refueling tanker kind of thing? I mean, God's blessing falls short and the Kohanim have to pass it along. It's like a long throw in from, far left field. You got to have someone in the middle to keep throwing to relay it in.
Maybe it's because humans connect better with humans.
So a big part of it is that for most of our life, most of our blessings come through other human beings, not always one standing at the front of the room with their hands up, but in many other aspects as well, through our family, through our friends, our community. We connect better to humans. Throughout our tradition, we say that the Torah speaks in the language of humanity, precisely because the full abstract nature of reality in God is a bit hard for anyone to grasp. So having a human component to this makes the blessing much more relatable for most of us. Absolutely. And what's Rambam saying? There's a key word here about what the priests are doing.
It's a mitzvah that they were commanded.
They were commanded. It's a mitzvah, right? So Rambam, as well as many of the other sages, point out that God doesn't just go around blessing randomly. We have to make openings for the blessing. And one of the key ways that we make openings for blessing is by performing a commandment. Right? When you perform a mitzvah, whether it be lighting the candles, whether it be giving to the poor or visiting the sick or keeping kosher, you are essentially making a crack in the mundane world and saying, make this sliver an opening for divinity. And through that holiness, more blessing can come. And the Kohanim are doing this paradigmatically, that they are standing and deliberately performing the mitzvah, which is meant to remind us that through mitzvahs, blessings can occur. Follow that sentence? Right? They are doing the mitzvah of blessing in order that we open ourselves up to the opportunity of blessing through mitzvah. It's kind of circular, I know, but that's kind of what infinity's like. So they need to act, not because God couldn't act without them, but because God won't act without our action. As often put euphemistically, God helps those who help themselves. It doesn't mean we can help ourselves 100%, but it does mean if you don't do something, don't expect God to do anything either.
Like most things, you got to do the footwork.
You got to do the footwork.
It's not the state of grace. You have to earn it, and this is the way we earn it.
Exactly. Although I'm trying to come up with a metaphor that's better than footwork for the hands, but jazz hands.
Hand waving.
Yeah, jazz hands. All right. One more time, Rashbam, the grandson of Rashi, will try to wrap this up for us.
You shall not bless them in the manner people bless one another, wishing that certain individuals will experience blessing of a certain kind.
Right, so, may you be blessed with a happy family. May you be blessed with an honorable occupation. May you be blessed with health and longevity. We hopefully extend those blessings either verbally or at least in our heart to each other often. And Rashbam is saying that's not what's happening here. This isn't them extending a blessing to us in this kind of specific manner.
Instead, the priests are to make it plain that they pray to God to extend God's blessings to the people whom the priests face at the time.
Right? They face us. They don't face God in the choreography of the sanctuary. Obviously, they're facing God internally, but hopefully you understand what I mean by that.
Verse 24 makes clear that as a result of this prayer to God by the priests on behalf of those whom they wish to bless, God does in fact extend this blessing. Verse 27 also makes clear that what the priests are instrumental in doing is to bestow God's name on them, not their own name.
Not their own name, exactly. Right, that last verse that we read, that's way up on the top of page 805, verse 27, says that you will place my name upon the people. And that ultimately is the nexus of this blessing, right? The priests are praying for the blessing to come to the people, not from themselves, but praying that God will. And the ultimate blessing, of course, that will rest on the people is God's name. That's all they're actually doing, is putting God's name on us.
When we hear the priestly blessing, do we hear verse 27?
We do not.
Oh, that's what I...
No, because verse 27 is a summary of the result of the other three verses.
But it's not articulated.
But it is not said by the Kohanim, exactly. But that's what we achieve by this blessing. We achieve, in addition to all of the discussion of the other commentators of what each word might mean, the ultimate cumulative effect is that God's name rests upon us. Not the Kohanim's, no offense, guys. Even though we call it the Kohanim's blessing, it's actually God's blessing. But God is trying to show us through this mitzvah the pattern of how blessing is achieved and what that ultimate state of blessing is, which is to simply have God's name rest upon us. And God's name, remember, represents more than just a title. God's name represents all of God's essence and all of God's existence. And that's what we hope for most of all. Sound good? All right, so pay attention the next time you hear the blessing.
Okay.
All right, take care, everyone.
Good stuff.
Hope everyone had a good Shavuot.